It's 7 p.m. and I'm calling the October 10th, 2024 Planning Board meeting to order. The meeting is being recorded and I will begin by taking roll. So when I call your name, please indicate that you're present. I know Pat Norton will not be here. Jonathan Poor.
Jonathan Poor, present.
Bill Wheaton, I don't see him yet. Emil Dahlquist.
Emil Dahlquist here.
Beth Herr. Darcy Dale.
Now joining us.
Bill is. Did you say that Bill Wheaton was joining us?
No, Beth.
Oh, Beth. Beth Herr. You're muted, Beth.
Yeah, sorry, here.
Darcy Dale.
She can't unmute herself.
You're muted too. You're muted.
She said she can't unmute herself.
Patrick, can you unmute Darcy?
Okay, great.
Oh,
Here,
yeah.
Darcy Dale here.
Jeff Austin.
Jeff Austin here.
And Marnie Crouch present. And I don't know whether Matt Hamill will be able to join us. He has a family emergency. So we have a number of items on the agenda, but I did invite Mark Connors, our new planning director, director of planning and land use, to join us very briefly to introduce himself to us and just enable us to put a face to a name. He has a birthday dinner with his mother, he advised me, so we don't want to detain him because family is more important than anything. So Mark, if you would just like to introduce yourself, just briefly summarize your background, and unless someone has some pertinent questions for you, or you have pertinent questions for us, we will let you get to your family obligation.
Great. Can you hear me, Marnie?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you for having me. I apologize. I'm a little blurry, but I'm at a winery in New Hampshire, and it was very loud, so they put me on the patio. So
How fitting.
Maybe we should be there with you instead.
So I'm very happy to meet you all, at least electronically. My name is Mark. I've been in planning for about 12 years. I started off in journalism, so I covered some planning board meetings as a reporter, and that kind of spurred my interest in it. So I went back to grad school to focus in planning, and I started my career in regional planning. Did that for about 4 years. In the last 8 years, I've worked for municipalities. So I worked mostly in New Hampshire for the town of Bedford, which is a fairly large suburban town just outside Manchester. And I currently work for Stratham, which is a town on the seacoast in New Hampshire. I kind of drive right by Hamilton every morning on my way to work, so I'm very happy to be getting a little bit of a shorter commute because I live in the Boston area. And Stratham reminds me a lot of Hamilton. It's a kind of a lovely suburban rural community. Has a lot of some pockets of suburban development, but a lot of the town has been preserved, a lot of active farms. When I tell people I'm going to Hamilton, the first thing they always say to me is that the horse town. So
The answer is yes. At least from my perspective, being a horse owner.
I told them it's pretty horsey, is from my perspective. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Since my career has been mostly New Hampshire, I've been focused a lot on trying to catch up a little bit on some of the issues that you're focused on. I know MBTA communities is a big one, as well as catching up on your bylaws and your master plans. So I hope to come in with a fairly good grasp of things, but obviously it's a bit of a learning curve, and going to be meeting with Patrick tomorrow to sort of catch me a little bit up to speed as well.
Right, great. Well, if there's anything I personally can do to facilitate your work in Hamilton, you just let me know. Does
Okay.
anyone have any particular questions for Mark?
I'd like to welcome him aboard.
That was nice, yes.
Thank
We're
you.
looking forward to having you. Yeah,
Yes.
there's a lot of work that we have to do. It's not necessarily reflected on our agenda this evening, but we know that there are trains coming toward us, and I don't mean that it's just the MBTA communities, but there's a lot on our plate. I mean, we have the implementation of the master plan, and most interesting, and I think most compelling, is the form-based code for our town center.
Yes, yeah.
So, there's a lot of things to consider, and I'm sure once you figure all that out, you'll wonder why you took the job. No, just kidding. Anyhow, I'll let you go and wish your mother a happy birthday from the Hamilton Planning Board, okay?
I will. Thank you very much and have a great meeting. I'm sorry to have to cut out early, but I hope to hop on your October 22nd meeting.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay,
Great,
thank
thanks.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so we'll start with the A&R request. We do have an A&R request that the applicant is Jolene Campbell. I believe that Kirsten Grable is authorized to speak on her behalf to fill us in on what the intention here was with respect to the A&R.
Madam Chairman,
Yes,
I'm going to have to recuse myself from this project. I have a personal involvement in this application, so I would like to sign off temporarily
oh, okay.
and
Okay.
join you after. Thank
Sure.
you.
Well done.
So is Kirsten here? Yes. Yes, you're muted, Kirsten.
Can you hear me
Good.
now?
Yes, and so I believe that you can speak for the applicant, but as Patrick gave us a brief summary of what is intended here, and I think that what is intended here fits squarely within the four corners of an A&R request. So unless any board members have any questions for you, I see Philip Lake is on the Zoom call as well. Unless there are any questions, I think we can make short work of this A&R request.
And the applicant is on as well.
Oh, good. Does anyone wish to ask any questions or to add anything? But as Patrick says, the lot that is being transferred will make 192 Linden Street a conforming lot. It will have no impact on the other lot in terms of its being a conforming lot, and it's pretty straightforward. So,
Madam Chair, what might make sense though is for the public's benefit is if somebody can share a screen and just walk us through it for a
good.
minute or two.
Right. Can anyone do that? I know the planning
I-
board has the,
I can, Philip Blake here, and I'm working with Kirsten on this. I can explain it. It's fairly self-evident, but if you want to pull it up on the screen, that would explain itself, I think, largely. Is someone able to pull it up on the?
Can you do that for us, Jeff?
Sure, let me just find it 1 second. I got it right here, 1 minute. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Beautiful.
I'm not sure if I can rotate it or not, but if you can see it that way, let me rotate it.
We see a screensaver.
Oh,
right. It's a nice location. Where is it?
I have, my apologies. Let me get the other screen. Let's see. Up to. Why
There we
isn't
go.
There
this-
we go.
Yep.
Perfect.
There we go. Perfect.
Perfect.
So I can narrate a little bit here. The two involved lots are depicted as Lot 1 and Lot 2. And Lot 2 would be transferring this parcel A, which is 6,586 square feet. This area would be transferred to Lot 1, which, as Marnie had mentioned, makes it a conforming lot. I'll also mention the test for an A&R lot is that the resulting property has to be accessible and has to have frontage. And you can see that both Lot 1 and Lot 2 have adequate, ample frontage and adequate, ample access. So that was the basis for my recommendation to the board that it be approved.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? Any board members, any members of the public?
Marnie, shall I make a motion so people can discuss it after it's seconded?
Certainly.
I move that we vote to approve this ANR.
Do I
Second.
have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion, any discussion at all? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll call a roll as to whether to approve it or not. Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Emil has recused himself. Beth Herr,
Aye.
Darcy Dale,
Darcy Dale, aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. So the application is approved and the matter can proceed.
Let me mention that I will take the Mylar copy that Kirsten provided us, as well as 2 paper copies. I'll put those on the table in the main entryway to our town hall so people can sign those. So please sign those as conveniently as you folks have the ability to do so.
We'll do that. So I think now Emil can rejoin us and we can go to the next item on the agenda. So if everyone can get that Mylar signed as soon as possible, that would be helpful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Emil, so the next item on the agenda is a status report on the comprehensive plan. I don't know how many members of the planning board attended the presentation by the consultants on September 30th. I was present. I know I saw Jonathan and Emil. Did you attend, Darcy? I don't.
No.
I was there as
Jeff
well.
was present. Beth was
Yep.
present. Yes,
Yeah,
Jeff
I
and
was
Beth
there.
were present. Yeah. So anyhow, if you could just give us a brief synopsis, Emil, that might be helpful.
Thank you, Marty. Yeah, I'll give you a very brief synopsis. Since our last meeting, the only public engagement with UTIL was at the September 30 meeting. And they titled it the Public Code Development Workshop was the title that they had used. And that was kind of in reference to where we are in this process. Right now, now being in October, we're roughly going to be transitioning into the code aspect of the comprehensive plan. So they're going to be starting to get into some of the code writing. So what they did at this workshop was to, the in-person, was to start to lay the framework of what some of the, how they envision framing the coding. So a good part of that was set up to show, given all of the surveys that they've gone through and the numbers that they're looking at, and a lot of the input from the advisory committee, they're sort of zoning in now on how to organize the codes and what the features will be, that how it gets organized. And they began with some of the guiding principles that were established by the advisory committee and agreed to by UTIL. And they laid it out in a more graphic way, including historic patterns, the vibrancy, variety, housing diversity, and connected and cohesive. These were aspects that were brought up, or these were actually core values that were brought up that the advisory committee was encouraging UTIL to satisfy as we go through the process. They did bring in some of the drawings that the advisory committee prepared for their meetings for the workshop, and I'll ask Jonathan in a minute to explain a little bit or give a little bit of reference to what actually happened in some of the workshops. But we had come up with a couple of strong things. One was that streets became very important as one of the organizing features for the comprehensive plan in downtown, because of the nature of the character producing nature of what streets are like. For example, how does Railroad differ from Bay Road? And you know, they're pretty strikingly different in how they're laid out and so forth. So it's a good way to kind of look at this. UTIL is kind of leaning toward frontages, which they'll explain, and we'll explain more in detail as we get into the code, but frontages as one of the things that they see as a strong feature. So they're combining those two aspects into something, I think, that they're going to start laying out their code. They have not done any code work yet, but the one missing piece now is that we need to get into some of the visioning aspect on the project. But they went through, they had a series of their zoning framework. They had brought in some photographs, I guess, of different towns like Falmouth, Westerly, Rhode Island, Weston, Mass, Exeter, New Hampshire. And they were included in one of the surveys, and they had come up with, it was a preference survey. They were asking people, if this were to develop, in what manner would you like to see it shape up? I mean, Hamilton has its own character. It has its own distinctive qualities. So not that they're going to replicate one of these towns, but they wanted to get a sense from people, what are the attractive features that some of these communities had that might be put into the visioning part of the process as they go forward. And they're relying quite a bit on the survey analysis. And then they did a piece on the frontage types in historic village center, which is Railroad Avenue. The scenic corridor on Bay Road, which is something the advisory board was really stressing, to kind of look to the past on Bay Road. At one time, it was a tree-lined street, quite beautiful. And there were some photographs brought by one of the, some pictures, historic pictures brought by one of the members of the advisory committee in one of the workshops. And he had a series of old pictures that were really, really quite engaging. And so the idea was to kind of not turn the Bay Street or Bay Road into an active commercial place, people trying to cross the roads and so forth, but kind of build on the strength of what Bay Road is, and kind of bring back some of the street trees and make it a more comfortable and enjoyable place for people to walk and to look at the whole downtown. There was a lot of conversation on Willow Street. That was one of the areas that they felt there was most interest in changing. It's the Willow Street industrial part, not the residential part. The residential part, most of the folks on the advisory committee felt that it was, it could be strengthened, but it was primarily, they liked the way it fits in with the old village itself, just everything to the west of Willow Street. And then the advisory committee was interested in some of the aspect of a greenway, which would be great to be able to walk from the southern to the northern or vice versa parts of the downtown along a greenway. And so there were some options there that were investigated. So that was really kind of the substance of a lot of what we were doing, and what UTIL is putting together now are some graphics of what is a street profile, what does a railroad street profile look like, so that it can be documented and used as a design tool going forward. So as I mentioned before, we're out of transition. What remains now is to come up with, well, what are the changes that need to be made, if at all, in downtown Hamilton. And the way that UTIL is going to be working on from here on out is to kind of focus on community involvement and coordinating a code with a visionary plan or a vision plan going forward. And what they will probably do is start a series of meetings that have not been established yet between some of the major boards in town, like the select board and the planning board. They're going to prepare a code and then look for, go through a series of feedback loops. They'll make a presentation initially to the boards and then get feedback on it to be sure they're still on target or on track, and kind of with the emphasis of bringing it to the community, at some legitimate point. So I think that's sort of what's to happen. So the transition goes into the code aspect in about a month in November, and then we work on it through the winter and heading toward the town meeting in April, and trying to meet the deadline for the town warrants. I'd like to ask Jonathan if he would just say a few words on the advisory committee. Jonathan chairs the advisory committee and has been instrumental to putting together a lot of these meetings and being a spokesperson really for that group. Jonathan?
Sure. So you covered quite a bit of what we've worked on in the workshops. That there's been 3 independent workshops that the advisory committee has had, and the first 2 kind of focused on mapping out what was special or worth preserving downtown versus what things could use improvement, and looking at desired connectedness to various parts of the downtown, including even outside of town. How could you connect Patton Park to Pingree Park, for example? So mapping those things out, those maps, that information has been all shared with UTIL. Much of that was presented at the last public workshop. And the advisory committee has been working closely with the information that UTIL has developed through their mapping, their research, their observations, and their polls, their surveys. And then in addition, the advisory committee of late is trying to take all those pieces, and a lot of them are sort of in pieces, street types, sub-districts, survey information. There's a lot of kind of fragments of things, and looking at how they fit as a system downtown, looking at the connectedness of all those things. For example, if this is a street type or a frontage type, in this area of the downtown, how does that transition and relate to the next street type that's adjacent to it? So looking at the connectedness or the disconnectedness of patterns, and then also the movement through those patterns. In other words, how would you move from one street type or sort of sub-neighborhood to another? How would you walk? How would you drive? Are there road connections? Are there parking lot connections? So looking really at the bigger picture. And so that's what the advisory committee has been looking at of late. And there seems to be a nice amount of engagement in that process and folks getting interested and excited about seeing the possibilities. And each time we have a workshop, what's been interesting is we come up against our time limit and we say, well, we could stop here or we could talk for a little while longer. And every workshop has run an hour long based on folks' engagement and I'd say enthusiasm. And so that's been very, for me, very inspiring and I think very helpful for folks to bring all their ideas together, and everybody's had ideas, everybody's contributed, everybody has been engaging, which has also been very nice. And there's a lot of different viewpoints and background and a lot of history. A lot of folks on the advisory committee have been in town for 40 years, 30 years, and have a lot to bring to the conversation. So it's been, I think, a very rich conversation, and then we've been endeavoring to share those dialogues with UTIL. And I think other than that, I think Emil covered quite a bit of what the general profile of the progression is.
Well, one thing I did overlook was UTIL for the first time announced that there will be 2 votes, I guess, at the town meeting. One for the form-based code as the the governing or the regulating code for the downtown itself. And the second was the 3A and how the 3A component would fit into part of the downtown. And they did some mapping. If you get a chance, I don't know if that's published yet on the website. I don't know if you know that, Marty or Patrick, whether it has been, but their presentation that would be useful to look at. But there's been no, to date, there's been no study on what the 3A would look like. And it's not really been a focus of the advisory committee at this point.
Yeah, I would also add that there's an idea to separate form-based code from 3A, and the specifics of the mechanism of how that's to be done is unclear at this point. Yeah. It seems it hasn't been shared with anybody, and the advisory committee has really not in any way engaged in that.
Right. I'll just have a couple of comments, and they're almost questions. So I will be really intrigued to see how the form-based code evolves and how the actual text of the code references the visual work products that the advisory committee is engaged in formulating. So that part of it, I think will be really fascinating and will probably occupy the planning board's time, because obviously the language that will be part of the form-based code should address a lot of the concerns and questions that people might have with respect to what happens to my property.
Right.
Nothing will happen to your property unless it's sold. But that kind of actual specific information will be embodied in the code. But the important thing from a planning perspective is how the town can evolve pursuant to this form-based code in a manner that will make it really ultimately spectacular. I might not see it in my lifetime, but someone will be the beneficiary of it, because those pictures, the historic pictures of Bay Road, were stunning. I mean, it was just stunning. And to think that all those trees got cut down, I mean, all of them, they must have been spectacular. But the only other question I had with respect to the work of the advisory committee, and this is really triggered by my time in London just this past week, is whether the bike paths are somehow being incorporated into the planning process, because that goes to sort of the connectedness between the 2 parks, the smart growth, and all of that other stuff. And these bike paths are ubiquitous in London, and not only do you have to make sure you look the right way so you're not hit by a car, you have to look the right way to make sure you're not hit by a bike. And all through the city, just like in Boston, you can rent a bike and go where wherever you want. I mean, it's the wave of the future. We're not there yet, but I wonder if that's part of this form-based code.
Oh, yeah, that at the early part, we had a list of kind of micro elements, and corridors being any number of things, not just roads, but corridors can be the train, commuter rail. It can be hiking paths or bike paths. We wanted to figure out where that could exist in the downtown, and especially get it off the roads if possible. And so that was one of the things that we were kind of studying in looking at the downtown plan, and how we could do that. The idea being make the environment at least give as much attention to the pedestrian in the downtown as to the automobile. Conceal parking, make the downtown comfortable for people to walk or bike. So the idea is, as Jonathan was saying, connectivity was really key, and get people to easily go from one part of the town to the other, encouraging them to walk as opposed to get in your car in the southern end and drive to the northern end and get out and walk around.
Or worse yet, get in your car and drive across the street between Cumberland Farms and Crosby.
Marnie, Jeff had a comment.
Yeah, I have a few questions if it's okay. And forgive me if I should know some of these answers already. What is driving the deadline warrant date, and what is that date?
Patrick, you know the deadline date on that?
It's the
let's
annual
see.
town meeting, but I don't have the date.
So-
The warrant date, I think, when that has to go in, I think is
Yeah, it's earlier than
month,
that.
a month ahead or something like that.
So March, is that what we're saying, March of next year?
Late March.
And what happens if we miss that?
Well,
It just
again,
doesn't get on the warrant.
that's
No, that-
what is the deadline? I mean, the warrant is when that goes out for publishing. That's one of the reasons they wanted it that far away from town, the town meeting. But from what I understand, based on last year's town meeting, they went actually a little bit late getting in. So I think you could modify the warrant, up to some deadline. And again, Patrick should know that. And
Yeah, actually,
Folders.
it's not unusual for articles to be amended all the way up to the actual town meeting.
Yep.
People don't like that, but when you do have work that is very detailed and sometimes controversial, contentious, etc., it sometimes is worked on all the way up until you get in the actual meeting. So, I know that the town meeting is April the 5th.
They usually, what they might do is they'll have a placeholder, so
Right.
work can continue, and then when
Yeah.
when we get the approval from the law firm, KP Law, then we'll know that it can go on the warrant.
Well, the reason I ask, and if you just bear with me for a second, I was at that last meeting and the few before that, there still seems to be a lot of contention, a lot of anxiety, a lot of confusion from the town. And even myself, several months ago, I was like, what's this form-based code? Why is it coming in? It seemed like it was connected to 3A. I'm educated now, it's not connected to 3A, although there's aspects that could touch it. But the town residents itself that will be voting on this in April, I think a large majority of them either don't have the desire or the time to make that distinction between what form-based code is and how it's not connected directly to 3A or Winthrop. So it's part of our, and just indulge me for a second, it's part of our job of making sure we instill trust and confidence in the town. I would think it would be wise, if possible, and I know this is not the most welcome idea, is just to postpone this project and let 3A and the school consolidation project either succeed or fail on its own, and then bring in form-based code and educate the community. This is what it is. It has nothing to do with that. And now you either know you're playing with 3A or with Winthrop or not. But right now it's just so conflated with those other two issues, and it's so compassionate. I mean, you were in that meeting, this past meeting, there's people they're just shut off. They just want to say no because they're so compassionate to 3A or the school they just want to say no to this as well because they see some sort of connection to it. So I think it'd be beneficial, the form-based code would be beneficial for us, but it'll also be beneficial to succeed if we waited 6 to 9 months to bring it into the town and make it come after 3A is cleared up, after the school consolidation decisions are cleared up.
I think I would agree with that 110%. That the town will be so suspicious and is so suspicious of anything around 3A that they'll vote this down, as towns are across the Commonwealth. I think there's another reason to postpone it, which is if the towns receive a favorable ruling from the court and send this back to have a different process for administrative guidelines or whatever it is, a year from now, we may be faced with a different set of constraints for 3A, which is half as many units or smaller radius or whatever, and we will want to rethink a little bit how we rezone if we're not going to do as much rezoning as we're afraid we're being forced upon now. I mean, we might have a different proposal, and to try and anticipate all that now seems to be foolish, and we might expend some political capital with the town in trying to do it.
Marnie,
There-
Marnie has Deb has a hand up if board members are willing to indulge the public at this point.
Well, I'd like to hear from any other board members before I hear from the public.
Emil, do you want
Because
to? Oh, go ahead.
does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I would like to add something, which is that it's helpful for everybody to remember that the form-based code was the leader here. It's been talked about for many, many years. The consideration of how to improve the downtown, rezoning downtown has been sort of on our agenda since I've joined the board over 4 years. And 3A just sort of came along and smacked us on the butt, so to speak. And we had in fact already even made a commitment to hire a consultant to help us with form-based code. So in a sense, 3A is along for the unwelcome ride in a sense here. And while you could, it's beyond my pay grade to decide or tell the town whether to delay the vote on form-based code. You could do that, but the point is that to do the preparation work is part and parcel with this consultant's work. So we can't stop that work. We can't stop that form-based code because it's all the same real estate, even if they're different subjects. It's all the same planning lens, even if they're different subjects and different goals. And so we really need to continue looking at form-based code, develop form-based code, and then whatever the consultant or the town needs to do on 3A and separate them as much as they can. And then it would be up to the town, or maybe the planning board could make a recommendation of whether you take that completed work or semi-completed work and then separate the votes, delay the vote on form-based code until the temperature of the town is settled down. But that's beyond my pay grade here in terms of how this works. But it's very helpful to remember that the dog is form-based code. The tail of the dog is 3A. In terms of this consultant effort. And, Emil, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I wouldn't rule out what both Jeff and Bill, were commenting on. The town had committed is going to miss its deadline of December 31st to meet the Section 3A requirements for some kind of. And the reason given was that we wanted to do a study on that, whether or not it was anticipated that the resistance would be as great as it is, I don't know. But my sense is once we do hit the code part of this, the planning board is going to have to educate itself in a lot of ways about what it means, what a form-based code can do, can't do. and why it turns out it's really the best tool that I think the planning board has going forward. And we're going to get through, and these will be public meetings, and hopefully the public will tune in and learn a lot about it, why it is, number one, the best tool to plan your community, because it has a certain amount of certainty to it. It's predictable. The developers like it because they know what is expected of them. The community is completely involved, or they should be, at the outset, in kind of coming up with the ideas of what is the downtown that Hamilton wants to see. So that input is really important. And you have a top rate, I think, urban planning firm working on this. So I think that the combination is right. Whether I think we're going to find out in another month or two where we really stand on this with regard to public information and public, whether people are going to agree to 3A or not is really an open question.
Right.
Right
You
now-
know, the way I look at it, the form-based code is really protective of the town.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
once that
Yeah.
form-based code gets implemented, and the form-based code does provide for as of right, consistent with its parameters.
Right.
So the form-based code has the form of any future development in the town. So, and it's as of right. So it puts some type of a break on what might happen with 3A, depending on the outcome of the Supreme Judicial Court's ruling. So having the form-based code as a platform, if we have to put 3A on top of it, we already have something that will prevent like just a free-for-all of 3A, which, given our infrastructure issues, I'm not sure would be a total free-for-all, but the form-based code would channel or put parameters around what might happen if the town is required to implement 3A. And I listened to the arguments that were made before the Supreme Judicial Court, and there are many very interesting issues. They're complicated issues. The questions that the justices asked were very piercing, and it's difficult to predict. I wouldn't even begin to predict how they would rule. There were more than 22 amicus briefs that were filed. So there were definitely housing advocates that were very much in favor of Section 3A to address the housing shortage in Massachusetts. So, but the justices were very much focused on the three questions they identified for the amicus brief. And in particular, they were concerned that the guidelines, which are not regulations. The guidelines have the effect of regulations, but they were not implemented in accordance with the Administrative Procedures Act. So there was a real question there. So the statute itself is mandatory. If the guidelines go away, then there would have to be some alternative. And of course, there was arguments about whether the Attorney General even had the ability to enforce this 3A statute. But I think the form-based code, and again, it's a preliminary thought in my mind, subject to change. I mean, I think it's always wise to keep the door open because someone may come up with an argument that's very, very compelling, or there'll be some new information that would cause me to change my mind. But I actually look at the form-based code as a shield for the town, so that when 3A comes down the pike, we have a bit of an armor if we need it.
Yeah.
So
I would like to add I'd like to add a really key component to that, and you sort of touched on it, but I'd really like to nail it home. And that is, let's pretend 3A vanishes, okay? Form-based code is also the #1 shield, the defense for Hamilton to prevent unwanted change or development. It is not It is not a floodgate for development. It has nothing to do with that. It's a control. It's a guardrail. It prevents unwanted development. If you think of it that way, you know, it promotes what you want and it stops what you don't want. Current zoning doesn't do that. You don't have that protection.
Yeah.
And
Right.
3A is one example, if I can just finish here, 3A is only one example of that onslaught of undesirable development. So whether or not you agree with 3A or not, form-based code, you know, I want to make sure that you understand when Emil said developers like it. Developers like it not because it opens floodgates to development. Developers like it because there's no surprise about what's allowed and what's not allowed.
Right.
That's really key, really key. I'll stop there.
Again,
I'd like to,
ahead.
excuse me, I think we should consider a strategy though, because there are no more newspapers and it's going to be really hard to get John's ideas out there. So maybe what we should do is consider at town meeting and see how things go. And if we perceive that the crowd, the legislature at town meeting are going to be kind of negative about it, we can always pull it and save it either for a special town meeting or the following town meeting, because if we let it, if we know the town's going to go against it, and they do, we can't bring it back for 2 years.
Right.
So we have to be we have to strategize about how we want to use this system that we have.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
would agree
So,
with all those statements.
I would
Yeah.
agree.
To make the, I think Darcy's comment is definitely
Spot on.
an important one to make. But let me, you know, put a footnote in that, because the public hearings process that you have to do on any article,
Mhm.
you know, and certainly both of these, you know, zoning efforts are going to have an article with individual hearings associated with each. You know, the public tenor and temperature is going to be, you know, I have to believe, you know, very much apparent during that process. And if it's clear to the board that it's, you know, the discretion is a better part of valor and holding it off, either one of them, I think that might be another, you know, thing to remember, because you don't want to have an important opportunity being subordinated, you know, based on the bad, you know, comfort level of
The
the
vibes.
Fear.
Again, it's important to remember though that all of this is tied to one consultant contract, and so we can't pull the plug on the form-based code development process, but we absolutely can pause on the vote whenever we feel like it. Again, that's not my decision, but it'd be a wise decision.
Right, right.
The only thing I would say is if I were the consultant, I might think about a slightly different code, depending on, let's just be quantitative about it, on how much development 3A was going to force upon the town. And if it wasn't much, then we could think about a form-based code that keeps the town in its kind of small little rural character. But if we have to build, 25% more housing units, then the form of the form-based code is going to look a lot different.
Yeah,
If I was
just
a
to be-
consultant, that would make a difference in sort of how I might think
right.
about it.
They're really, when you look at town planning, there is an ideal size and relationship and balance between the different aspects of a downtown, between the commercial part of it, the residential part, the mixed use part. They're very careful balances that they're going to try to achieve. So this isn't a matter of just putting as many residences in there as possible. This is about getting the right balance. And I think that's that's kind of key to town planning, and I think that is the object.
Yeah, the other aspect of 3A, at least in its present iteration, is that there can be other districts where where multifamily housing can be constructed. And one of the districts that UTIL was contemplating was out at the end of Chabaco Road toward Route 128. Another was on the Gordon Conwell site. And then obviously some part in the downtown, but we will know the parameters of 3A probably at the latest in mid-February, 130 days approximately from October 7th. And that will really shed light on how everything unfolds here. But the downtown isn't necessarily the only place where there can be multifamily housing. It can be elsewhere.
Yes, so real, one last statement. So I understand and I completely appreciate form-based coding. I see value in it. Absolutely. I've learned that and I see value in it. Again, my biggest concern is the public perception of how they are connected, whether it came first or second. That's my concern. And so I kind of lean towards what Darcy says. I see it's naive now to say, let's postpone the whole thing because there is a project, there's a contract there with this group that's helping us to build this. And so, I lean towards what Darcy said with let's just be cognizant of what the temperature is out there. The only the only other thing I'd say though is that the UTIL website still has a lot of heavily, let's try to meet 3A in there. And that's, I think that sets a lot of people.
Sabotaging the effort. That's
I'm
what
sorry?
it's doing. It is sabotaging the effort
Yeah.
of form-based code, trying to get it out there in front. And all everyone sees when they go to that website is 3A.
Yeah.
You're right.
So I'm not sure if there's a way to make that distinction or separation on their website, but right now, I mean, as you read it, I'm looking at it right now, as you read one of the paragraphs, I mean, it's while contributing to meeting 3A requirements. It's written in there several times. So, I mean, that's just torpedoing the whole project.
I mean, that's probably because we have 170 towns and UTIL is sitting there thinking, well, if they're all going to adjust form-based code, we're going to have a lot of contracts. And so, I mean, they're kind of hitching their wagon to that horse. But I from our point of view, that's counterproductive. Yeah.
Well, did anyone from the public want to make any comments? I think we need to move on because right now we're we don't have this precise question on our agenda. And
Can I be from the public for about a minute?
Sure.
Look at the northern lights that are happening right now outside. If you go, this was taken in my front yard just a few minutes ago.
Oh, you're
Look
kidding.
at that. No, right now.
Really?
Right
We
on
need
Woodbury
to hurry
Street.
up with this meeting so that we can go see
There's
the
supposed to
northern
be
lights.
tomorrow night. There's supposed to be, or
Yeah.
Saturday night. There's supposed to be a comet too.
Ooh.
Wow.
Oh yeah,
Are
it was
you kidding?
all in the times. Once
Okay,
every 80,000 years, you see this comet. So no human has ever seen it. But
Darcy, if
it'll be out
anyone's, if anyone's smart, they'll go see something that they may never see again, as opposed to this. But does anyone from the public want to make a comment or
I believe Deb
anything
has
with
her
respect-
hand up.
Hi. Yep. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
So yeah, I have a few comments. One, I think I would agree with Jeff that the town's perception is that 3A is what's driving the form-based code, even if that's not how it actually happened. I believe that the town manager has a deliverable to UTIL that is how does 3A get implemented. So UTIL wants to meet the deliverable set by the town manager. That's the client. And I think until that deliverable shifts, they're going to persist in having a 3A presence. So that's just something important to remember. A thing that I brought up that I'm still not content with in the meeting on the 30th was the drawing of the two circles. There was the first vote representing the votes the town was going to have. One was just a circle and the other was a circle and then an overlapping circle. And there was that gray part. Do you guys remember that from the meeting?
Yes.
And I was asking the question, what's in the gray part that's different in the second vote that's not there in the first vote, right? Because it's overlapping circles. And so if you take the second vote away, that gray part is still within the first circle, but how is that portion of land or whatever it's representing, how is it different? And I was not, I didn't feel ever that I got a good answer. And I even spoke to the man, whose name, not Zoe, the man, whatever his name was.
Matthew.
I spoke with him for about 20 minutes afterwards in front of that chart, like, explain to me what that is. What does it represent? And how if that second vote goes down, like, how do we know that 3A isn't folded into the first vote because it's an overlapping circle? And so I think these are the kinds of questions that make us concerned that something might be coming in, you know, under the radar, without without clarity. It would be better if we could understand, like, what's in that second circle that's overlaid onto the first circle for the gray that wouldn't be there if the 3A vote didn't happen. Does that make sense? Am I
Yeah,
asking the question? Do you get it?
Yeah, maybe.
And-
Let me just try
and I
to
just-
answer, see if I can
Yeah.
answer that. I thought it was an excellent question when you asked it. And the question got fumbled during the course of the meeting. And I'm glad you try to pursue it with Matthew later, because it was an excellent question, and a legitimate one, certainly. And it wasn't a satisfying answer. The reality is, at this point, they have not really determined what 3A looks like in the downtown. As far as we know, we've not seen any information along those lines. So what I can only sort of guess at this point that they were looking at mixed use, where it could be business, commercial or retail on the ground floor and residential on the upper floor, in a good part, or a good amount of, they're looking for 20 acres, 15 to 20 acres in the downtown for residential, to meet their requirement, meet the 3A requirement. And then the rest would be at a remote site. But the fact is, we have not seen any of the 3A yet, and we are eager to see how they're going to manage it. But that's not information we have at this point as part of the advisory committee. But that's
But is the
that's what-
form-based code portion that represents that, let's say it's multifamily housing on some portion of that first circle territory, right? Is that multifamily form-based code content in the first circle, whether the circle's overlaid it or not? Does that make sense to me? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, we
Like-
don't know. We don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, and so I think that's a really important thing, because you're
Yeah.
gonna show two pictures and you're gonna have one that's overlapping the other. How do I know that what's in the first isn't
Yeah,
still the part that's gray, even though we didn't vote that in? I guess
I
that's,
know you're
and
not going
that's
to
where
be
you need to
you're not going to be
understand that.
happy with the answer, but we're going to have you're going to have to wait a little while
Yeah.
till
Yeah.
they actually create something.
Can
Okay,
I-
Yeah,
could,
and I
Can I just weigh in just for a second? It won't be a mystery when they develop the code. You'll be
Right.
able to tell what that circle is. It's just they haven't done it yet. So
Yeah.
it's not like they can sneak it in, but
No.
Yeah.
what they can't sneak it in. It's not like a secret. It will be explicit, but the
Right.
explicitness isn't there yet. We haven't reached that step yet. So
Okay.
we all have to just be patient
Yeah.
and see how it unfolds.
okay,
Okay.
and
Again,
at
we
this
have to
point,
continue, on the form-based code, and the 3A track will happen simultaneously. We just all need to be patient. There will
Yeah.
be clarity
I just-
in the future. There will be
Right.
clarity in the future.
okay,
Since the
so,
topic was to follow up on the meeting, I just thought it was important to raise that point. And I just also want to publicly thank Emil and Jonathan for their leadership of the advisory committee, because they've put in a ton of hours on their own and have brought really good content forward, and they're patient with all of us trying to understand it. I just want to publicly thank them for that, because I know it's a ton of work. So thank you.
Yeah,
okay.
thank you.
Can we move on? This was a useful discussion, but I don't think we're at a stage where we can actually make concrete decisions. But Darcy, your suggestion as to withdrawing any bylaw implementing a form-based code if it looked like it would not pass is a good one. So let's move on to the inclusionary housing bylaw. At our last meeting, we did discuss this quite at length, and Matt Hamill provided us with a clean copy. Did everyone have a chance to look at this version of the inclusionary housing bylaw?
Yeah,
I read,
I took a look,
But
I looked,
but it wasn't that long ago. It was just maybe a couple of hours ago. So I haven't really, you know,
I
Well,
read it, I thought it
I
was
haven't
excellent.
committed it to memory.
I thought,
right. There
I
were
thought
really,
Matt's work was excellent.
Yeah.
What he did.
yeah. So there were really only two sections of the inclusionary housing bylaw that were subject to amendment. And they were clarifying how the number of units would be counted. And then the other was clarification of area median family income, so that the area median family income for a family of 4 is always the measure of the payment in lieu of the construction of affordable units. So I went through his document. In fact, what he worked with was provided by the Affordable Housing Trust. And I went through his work product. I actually downloaded it. It was a Word document. I found 2 spacing issues, which I corrected, and the omission of a parentheses, I added that back. Those were the only minor things that I found, but I now have them in a Word document that I can forward to Patrick. And then the only other thing that we have to do with respect to this inclusionary housing bylaw is to correct the definition of area median income. It should now be area median family income. That definition appears in section 11 on page 107 in a vacuum. I would recommend that it be moved to page 112. This pagination will change, obviously, but the definition should be included under the inclusionary housing bylaw. The way the definitional section is set up is a little confusing, but that was something that Matt didn't address, but that I can do. So at the last meeting, it was my intention for us to vote to improve these amendments to the inclusionary housing bylaw so that they can be passed on to town council. Now, bear in mind that Robin Stein actually drafted 2 opinion letters with respect to the 2 areas of this bylaw that we're amending, and we have amended it in conformance with how she interpreted it. We're just now making it eminently clear so that the issues that arose in the context of the special permit for 133 Essex doesn't arise in the future. So does anyone have any questions or comments about this? And do you feel that we're ready to vote to approve the proposed amendments and then forward them on to town council so that the amended inclusionary housing bylaw can be put on the warrant for the annual town meeting in 2025?
Marna, did you want me to share the document that you emailed or no?
You can. Patrick forwarded to us. As I said, the one typo I found was in section 8.3.5 subsection 3. And there was just a missing parentheses, and the only other issues were spacing.
Yeah, 3 right after median family income right there, where your cursor is. There's a missing parentheses
Right.
and a space after the second parentheses.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we went over these changes at the last meeting, and it's, my recollection is no one had any issues with how he drafted. In fact, he did a good job.
Shall I make a motion?
Please do.
I move that we vote to approve the amendments to the zoning bylaw and zoning map. Is that the right one?
It won't be a zoning map. It would be an amendment to the 8.3, the inclusionary housing bylaw, and then a concomitant amendment to section 11, the definitions.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Any discussion, any further discussion? Any comments from the public with respect to this amendment, these amendments to the inclusionary housing bylaw? No? Shall we take a roll call vote? Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Her, is she still here?
She's not.
Darcy Dale
Darcy Dale, aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. So Patrick, I will forward you this just very modestly revised Word document and the definitions either tomorrow or Friday. And we've accomplished one thing tonight for sure.
Did Bill Wheaton vote?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you vote?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You did.
Yeah, he voted.
So, Marnie, while we're on the subject of definitions, can I just, can I talk a little bit about that section of the bylaw for a moment?
The inclusionary housing bylaw or the
Well, no,
definitions?
you mentioned the definitions also have to be revised to support the, you know, the inclusionary housing bylaw. But this is
Actually,
more a broader question about that section of the,
But I will just say the definition itself doesn't have to be changed, but instead of calling it area median income, it will be area median family income with the same definition.
agreed.
it's not-
This is a different subject, but just related to definitions.
Okay,
I don't
sure.
want to hijack the agenda, but I just wanted to, if this is the right time, I'd like to just offer an observation about that section of the bylaws.
Right, go ahead.
Okay, so I do find you mentioned this. I find it a bit unusual the way the definition section is set up with the subsections referencing the special the subsections of definitions referencing the special sections in the bylaw. I find is a little bit clumsy. But I'd be interested to hear what other people think about it. And then in addition to that, when you go through and basically look at the definitions globally, I find it might be worth looking at them to tune them up a little bit. For example, the building height description is, I think, not very complete or good for the town. I think there's really not much in here to talk about lot coverage. There's no definition of lot coverage. There's just some things that it might be worth looking at. That's all. That's my only comment.
Well, yeah, and usually you like to define things up front.
Yes, that's most bylaws. It starts with definitions. It starts there. And it's just alphabetical. You know, why is it section 11 and why is it all chopped into pieces? And then why are the pieces missing? That's
Well,
my question.
sometimes it's chopped into pieces and sometimes it's organized, but
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
the first comment I had when I looked at this zoning bylaw was like, why are the definitions in the back and you don't even know they're there until you get
Yes.
there?
Yes, exactly. So, and they're really, I find very disjoint to read. I mean, I've had to use this bylaw for other projects and I find it very clumsy compared to other towns' bylaws for that reason.
Okay,
And I had an employee who just blew up when he couldn't find the definition of lot coverage. So anyway, I'm not saying we do it tonight, but I'm just saying it could be worth looking at that, the planning board looking at the definition sections kind of globally. Is this where it belongs? Is it complete? Is it well organized to be used properly? It's a question.
It's a question, and the, well, the next item on the agenda was to look at these accessory dwelling units. So I made a first crack at amending the applicable provisions to address the new law. We talked about separating any new provisions to accessory dwelling units within an existing residence versus a detached building. That was a good idea, but I have nothing further to add on that. But I did want to ask Patrick whether you have heard anything from town council about the issuance of guidelines or regulations with respect to accessory dwelling units.
He's
You're
muted.
muted. Patrick, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. No, those haven't come out yet.
Yeah, and I don't know when they will. And when you look at the guidelines that were developed for 3A, they evolved over years. So it's something that we have on our plate, but I'm going to put it aside for now. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was Richard Maloney's errata. And so this sort of goes to your point, Jonathan. I sent out a memorandum, and I am asking every planning board member to look at different pages of the bylaw, different sections, and read them through for scrivener's error, not substance. We will not be able to look at amending, for example, the open space and farmland preservation development bylaw. That will not happen before the annual town meeting, but we certainly can address the errata that Richard Maloney found. And when I was looking at the accessory dwelling unit sections, I noticed in the table of use regulations, it's quite an interesting sequence, because the numbers jump all over the place instead of being 1 through whatever. Let's see if I can find them. Oh, here we go. So just by way of example, in the table of use regulations for community facilities, it's 1 through 8, and then there's another 8. In residential, there's 1 through 7, then 8.2, and then 11. So
Yeah,
I mean,
it doesn't make any sense.
It's just silly. I mean, it's like the bylaw evolved, but nobody fixed these kinds of things. And this is what Richard Maloney is finding too. So I'm asking, and everybody has assignments. So Jonathan, do you want to do definitions? No, I'm just kidding. I assigned section 11 to Beth, but we really, I think the point of this exercise is to just get rid of any egregious mistakes, and not to do substance. And so in terms of substance, changing the definitions would be a substantive endeavor, and it would require making sure that the definitions, comport to the relevant sections of the bylaws that they appear in. So it is a much bigger task. But and so I have assigned these tasks, and I've given everybody a lot of time into November to proofread approximately 13 pages, which I don't think it's a monumental amount of work. So I figure that if we do clean up the bylaw, it inures to everybody's benefit to have it to eliminate those mistakes. That we could get the correction of errata on the warrant for the annual town meeting, and it would probably just be on the consent agenda. So I think that would be a worthwhile thing to do. But again, we don't want to make substantive changes because that would potentially involve public hearings. Will we have to have public hearings, Patrick, to correct errata in the?
Yes,
We would.
yes.
But I mean, I'd be hard pressed to see how some member of the public could say, keep the numbering in the table of use regulations the way it is. I mean, I wouldn't anticipate we would get pushback on that type of exercise.
Yeah, I would agree. Usually it goes the other way. They see things that we haven't gotten to yet is more likely a comment. But
Well, yeah.
you know, that's fine.
So then the only other question I have, and the way I set it out in the memorandum, I think if everybody just prints out their pages and makes whatever corrections they find on that printed page, then it's easy to compile those pages, and then one person can make the corrections. But we would need to have the PDF of the zoning bylaw eventually made into a Word document so that the corrections that the planning board approved could be incorporated. Do you follow that, Patrick?
Yes.
Okay.
It must
So-
be somewhere in a Word document.
Yeah, somewhere it must be, yeah. So did anybody have any problems with their assignment? I mean, I just kind of did it at random. So, okay, so we can move on from that. So be advised of the dates in the memorandum.
So are we not going to deal with Richard Maloney's memorandum then?
Oh, I think we should consider it all at one time.
Okay,
Once we get everybody's errata all together, we'll
All right.
go through it individually.
okay.
So now we can turn to board business. And at our last meeting, I had drafted a letter to the select board with respect to the formation of an implementation committee. And so we talked about the parameters of that letter. So I went ahead and provided you all with a draft letter. And I'm wondering if you have any comments or questions, or whether you request any changes to that document.
Marnie, did you get my 2 typos?
I did get your 2 typos and I fixed them.
Okay, and the other thing is, I think it's important when we are talking about the composition of the implementation committee that we stress that it's a broad array of townspeople, town leaders, and it provides checks and balances so that there's no one group, whether they're elected, appointed, or just an employee, paid employee, has the power, there's not concentrated power, and that we're trying to make sure that checks and balances are in play.
Right. Did you have any specific language or
Well, that's, just the composition of the implementation committee has been populated to provide checks and balances so that there's no concentration. Something along that line might be helpful because people are looking for that right now.
Well, where I think that might be addressed is with respect to the authority of the implementation committee, because what I said is that the only ability of the implementation committee to vote would be to change any of the particular goals or action items if circumstances changed. So I
Well,
think,
having a broad array of town leaders will provide us with, the security, knowing that we're going to get a broad range of ideas and people will work together and we will have checks and balances of some, I don't know.
Okay, I understand. I can add it right at the beginning. Let me think a minute.
I like
I
it when
have
people,
here, the committee would be comprised of the following 11 members. I see I didn't get a colon, but I don't need one now. The following 11 members for the purpose of providing a broad array of viewpoints and checks and balances as well.
Martin, do you
put
want
it-
to bring it up on the screen? Do you want me to share it?
You can share it. Did anyone else have any comments?
good.
I'm good.
I have a comment here. Do we really want to mention Weston and Sampson's performance here?
Yeah, that seems a little bit more
Yeah,
personal
yes,
than what would be necessary.
yes, I agree.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yes, I would agree with that.
We could mention a factual history, but we don't need to characterize it in any particular positive or negative way.
Okay, I'll just say the transition, which navigated the transition associated.
But you had associated with inadequate work product by
Yeah.
Weston and Sampson.
I mean, I guess, is that even critical to this?
No, it's not.
Yeah, so that, it seems like we could kind of delete that nature of comment.
I'll just say the transition between Weston and Sampson and their planning.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah, so it's more of a timeline, a factual timeline than a editorial comment. Sounds good.
Okay. Any other comments?
Maybe it's
No.
already in here, but do we need to have a definition of what implementation consists of?
That's an authority. It's really just it. The implementation committee is a cheerleading squad. It's really there to to oversee whether or not the master plan is being implemented. And if it's not being implemented, to try and assess what assistance can be provided so that the plan can be implemented. You don't develop a master plan and put it on a shelf. You have to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
I was
so-
just trying to be cautious for further in the future, somebody misinterpreting what actually the action is for implementation. More
Yeah,
of an authority than.
so look at authority then and see if you would want to add anything to that. Authority of the implementation committee.
No, I know, that looks good.
Marty, that paragraph, at the September 17, you need a space between September and 17. So yeah, right there,
Where is that?
right there. You just had it,
Oh,
just a space.
Ace.
Okay,
where's that
conservation.
again?
Right there. September space 17.
Oh, right, there you go.
And conservation needs an I in it, under the composition of implementation committee.
Well,
Yeah,
here's another thought here. This letter didn't make it onto the agenda. It is part of the master plan, so you can make an argument that we don't have to vote to send this letter. It's just something
Yeah.
that we do. Or we can put this letter on the agenda for our next meeting, and everybody can thoroughly review it and send me comments, and I don't think there'll be substantive comments
No.
within the next day or two, and I will incorporate them, and we can vote to send this letter to the select board at our next meeting. Does that seem like a plan? As opposed to
Yeah.
as opposed to trying to read it now. But at the risk of sounding like a really irritated school teacher, I have to urge the planning board to do their homework and read the materials, because we can't be reading these lengthy letters and minutes during meetings. It
Yeah.
only takes a half an hour or 40 minutes to prepare to be able to address these things. So we will address this letter at our
Yeah.
next meeting. And so if you see typos or problems, send them to me now so that we won't have to go through this process the next time. So does anyone have anything else to report to the planning board? Patrick, do you have anything?
I do not.
We do then have minutes from September. Oh, wait, I did have questions for you, Patrick, though. So we approved the regulations at our next meeting. Now, those regulations don't have to go to the Commonwealth for any type of improvement. They're not a bylaw amendment. So have they been posted on the planning board's webpage yet?
I believe they have, yes.
Great. And the master plan still hasn't been compiled. We still don't have someone who can get those maps inserted. Is that true?
No, that's correct.
Do we have any kind of time frame where that might happen?
That's gonna be one of the first things that Mr. Connors is gonna be working on when he starts on the 28th.
Right. because it would be important to get that up on the town's website. And so then I guess the last order of business are the minutes from September 10th. And I did go through them. I picked up a couple typos and just made very minor revisions to this. So does anyone have any other amendments or problems with the minutes?
I see a typo, status report on the comprehensive. Is there an extra H in there?
It's missing an R.
Is that what it is?
uh,
I should put my glasses on.
Yeah,
That would help.
PRE, yeah. Right.
I missed that. Actually, you know who missed that? Word.
Oh.
I think I sent this through. You know, I do that review function.
Hmm.
Do I have a motion to approve these minutes, subject to the correction of that typographical error?
I move that we vote to approve these minutes as long as they are corrected.
Right. Do I have a second?
Second,
Second.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Weeden, aye.
Emil Dahlquist.
Emil Dahlquist abstain. I wasn't there.
Actually, you know what I learned? You can vote on these even if you weren't
If
there.
if I look at the video, yeah. Yes,
Oh,
I
so
haven't
look-
looked at it yet.
Oh, okay. Darcy Dale
Darcy Dale, aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. So I will make the correction to these minutes and we can go from there. So does anyone else have anything further to add to our meeting this evening?
No.
No.
Shall I make a motion?
Sure.
I move
I
that
want
we,
to go outside and look at the.
Yeah.
yes, we're going to, I make a motion to adjourn so we can go outside and look at the Aurora Borealis.
Second,
Second, Jonathan Poor,
Aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
aye.
Darcy Dale,
Darcy Dale, aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. I gotta get outside.
Yeah, get out there. It's beautiful. Bye.
Good night, everybody.
There's good
Bye-bye.
camera equipment out there.